Drawing Materials 101 Part 2, where we are chatting about how I sharpen my pencils, charcoal, conté, into very, very sharp sword-like points so that I have a very sharp tip and also a very long area of open either charcoal or conté stick to create a nice tone effect. I'm going to show you how I do this, which also maintains the integrity of the pencil and it prevents as much cracking as happens with a more traditional, customary pencil sharpener, which really limits the point that you can get and can be very, very finicky. We're then going to talk about erasers and paper, different thicknesses, colors, brands that I love and use and for different purposes. Okay, let's jump right into it with talking about how I sharpen my pencils this way. I do this with my charcoal, my conté, my pit pastels. All of these have been talked about in depth in part 1 of this video, so if you missed that, go and watch. I talk all about how and why I use these different pencils. For my graphites, I don't find the need to sharpen them to this point because by and large for graphite, I can get a really nice sharp point. It's a much harder lead than charcoal or pastel or conté. So when I put charcoal, pastel, conté into one of these smaller sharpeners or even a sharpener that would be larger that would have a hand crank to it, what often happens is you end up wasting almost inches of your lead because it is so soft in the charcoal, conté, and pastel that any sort of tension, if you hold the pencil up at an angle, it will just snap. So what I do is I sharpen them by hand. I learned this from Rob Liberace, and the difference really is astonishing how you can have this almost sword-like effect to the pencil and have much more to work with than just what is available to you from a traditional pencil sharpener. What I do is I take a blade. This one is a sort of an odd shape. I would traditionally just get the regular rectangular ones, though this one will work. And what I will do is oh so carefully take the blade. I'm supporting the brush with my left hand, my non-dominant hand, holding and supporting the brush with my index finger and then applying counter pressure with my thumb on the blade itself, pushing it up, and I will go along and just carefully remove the wood of the pencil. And you do have to be gentle with this so that you don't cut too deep and score the charcoal and cause it to snap. But you basically just want to expose that charcoal. This is a time-intensive process, but the result is absolutely worth it. What I would do would be on the breaks when your model is sitting or when you are having some downtime and your show is on, get a trash can in front of you and go to town. Sharpen up all of your pencils so that they are ready for battle, so to speak. There can be a little bit of a gum on the charcoal itself. I presume whatever adhesive they use to keep it inside of the wooden pencil. So you just want to be careful when you get to that point not to let that cause you to put too much pressure, too much forward pressure with your thumb and cause that lead to snap. This is a sensitive, see there's a lot right there of that gum. So I'm just going to carefully remove all of that. And you can expose more or less depending on what you need. This is an HB hard General's charcoal, so I could expose more of it, and it's a little bit stronger than a soft or an extra soft would be. I would definitely stop here with a soft just so that I don't have a ton of exposed charcoal sticking out because it's just a little bit less sturdy than the hard charcoal would be. But again, I'm just coming along here. It becomes somewhat meditative. Okay, when we get to this point then, I've got a nice point on or a nice exposed element of charcoal here. I'm gonna just get a little bit more. I like to have like about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch exposed here. Then it's time to come in and sharpen the point, which you can do only with the the blade. I'm just going to get that little bit of gum off there. Okay, got that off. You can do that only with the blade, or you can come in and use one of the sandpaper bad boys that they sell in the stores, okay? You've probably seen these before. These are good for specific uses. What I don't like about them is they can be quite wasteful. They fill up with charcoal so quickly if you're using them to sharpen everything. I like to use them for just a short period of time, just to see how I have this blunt edge, and I want it to be very sharp. So I will support the one end of the charcoal so that it's not bending and just going to snap off here, because it is very susceptible to breaking. And I will just rub this along. I'm slowly spinning it to the side as I do this so that it's getting a nice even sanding. And see there how I've just broken down the edges a little bit to create the beginning of that point. Then I will come back with this and just continue down that road until I have, and again, I'm going really softly, but just slowly coming along, acting like I'm a diamond cutter. You can watch the ridges. It's really, really satisfying until I get that perfect point. I'm probably about 1 minute away from a razor sharp point. You can then pick back up with your, let me knock this into the trash real fast. Okay, can pick back up here with this and just go a little bit further, check on it while I'm going to make sure. Almost there, almost to a nice, beautiful, perfect. Oh, check that out. I could even make this transition a little bit sharper so that I don't have a strong curve to it by changing the angle that I'm at, making it a little flatter. And there we go. I've got this beautiful sword now happening, ready to come in and draw, and I can use the long side to create more of a tone happening here, or I can use this razor sharp point to create a very pointed and beautiful mark. This is a bit labor intensive to sharpen your pencils this way, but as I've already said, the payoff is significant, and I would, ahead of a drawing session, spend a little bit of time. Again, you can have your show on, you could be in conversation, just relaxing and get into a meditative place and prepare all of your pencils so that everybody's laying in your tackle box or however you store your pencils ready to go. So when you have your subject matter in front of you, you can pick up a very well maintained tool to do exactly what you wish to do. Very, very, very important when dealing with charcoal or pastel or conté or a soft type of drawing material. Also with graphite, never let them drop and hit the floor or be extremely jostled around in transit. What happens is the piece of drawing material that's inside, that sort of tube that's inside the wood, when it's dropped and has a significant amount of friction happen or an acute event, it will snap all throughout the pencil. And that will cause you to be sharpening and going along ever so carefully and then have it snap because of a pre-existing snap. So it is impossible to avoid dropping some, but to the best of your ability, keep in mind for the longevity of your drawing materials, these things aren't expensive, but they aren't free. Don't let them hit the ground or have a very strong acute event that will cause there to be breaks all along the way. All right, now we're on to erasers. I use minimal erasers in my drawing practice, but I find that they pack a powerful punch. First up is, mine is quite dirty and I need to go in and clean them off with a nice towel and erase a little bit. But this is an Alvin. It's sort of a triangular shape. Mine has been used a little bit, so there's sharper points on it when you first purchase this eraser. And it's white. So this is actually a great learning example. When you are storing your drawing materials, in video 1 I showed you my tackle box, put your erasers into a Ziploc baggie. Do not let them float freely in with the charcoal because they will just attract all of that mess and it will not leave them without a significant amount of work. If you do that with a kneaded eraser, it will get absolutely ruined because the kneaded erasers are also somewhat sticky. I love this because it allows you to have a large surface area depending on how you hold it. If you're holding it this way, you have quite a large surface area to erase, or you can get very acute eraser marks because it's thin, if you can see that, and it has those points to it all along the sides, which mine, as I mentioned, are used a little bit, but they're still quite acute. So it's a very versatile tool, more versatile than, say, something like this little general's pencil eraser. It's a great eraser. It's cleaner than my Alvin one, so it could be even more valuable until I get this one cleaned off. This is a great eraser, but again, it doesn't give you that dexterity that the triangular shaped eraser does, but this would be great for erasing large swaths of a drawing. Then we come to the absolute king of erasers, in my opinion, which would be the kneaded eraser. It is a material that is unknown to me, but it's this somewhat sticky gray material that is very pliable. So you will usually get it in sort of a rectangular shape, but then because of its pliable nature, you can manipulate it into a very sharp point in order to get very specific little marks on your piece and very lightly lift areas out. If you are a member of my Patreon second tier, the Academy, where I share in-depth videos about the principles of painting, we have a 5-part series on value, color, and now drawing. And in that drawing module, I show you the process of making this painting in around 30 minutes, a way of eliminating instead of only adding with charcoal and thinking in the big shapes. And I use this to carefully lift out areas of charcoal that got a little bit too dark for my liking as I'm coming back to find more refinement. And this is really a very versatile eraser because it, depending on the pressure you use, the size that you manipulate it to be, it can help in so many ways to create softness, to remove materials, and more. This is a must-have, and having a harder eraser that can just be easier for maybe, you know, getting rid of searching lines on the drawing can be helpful. Something to keep in mind when you're using erasers like these two is that these have the tendency to wear the paper more. Paper has only so much life to it, and depending on the paper that you're using, that can be more or less true. So there are really hardy papers. We're going to get into this in the next topic, so this is a great segue. Really hard papers that can sustain many erasings or many applications of the drawing material, whatever it might be, and still have its integrity. Or there's much softer papers that are almost a little bit more like fabric. And if you come in on that paper with a rigorous erasing mark, it will lift the integrity of the paper and almost start to create a pilling effect, which will then change how your next layer of drawing materials goes down. It's not as forgiving, essentially. So you have to be aware that these can cause more damage to the paper with that heavy application of erasing, where the kneaded eraser is more subtle, softer. It can be more carefully manipulated to extend the life of that paper and not create a tired or worn out area that then makes the drawing feel like it might have like an oil spot or something wrong with it that really draws the eye away from the beautiful drawing that you have created. With that said, let's start talking about some of my favorite papers. There are so many different types of papers, and honestly, so many good ones that are available at your local arts and crafts store. There's a couple things to keep in mind. It does matter what it says on the front. You know, you'll walk through and it'll say watercolor paper, Bristol smooth, Bristol vellum, or charcoal paper, etc., etc. What they're trying to get across is, I think to some degree, the life of that paper, right? A watercolor paper is going to be very thick to absorb all that water. It's going to be very sturdy. If you go in with charcoal on that, it will have a different effect. It won't be as receptive, as springy as perhaps a charcoal paper, which is intended for charcoal to meet the paper. It's not intended for water. It will be thinner. So I would pay attention to some of those things. If you have no idea where to start, think about what you're going to be applying to that paper and follow the general guidelines. With that said, here's just a really quick rundown of some of my favorite papers. I'm a big fan of Strathmore paper, and they have a whole series of toned papers, okay? This one is their brown toned paper, which I love to create a beautiful starting point where you can not only apply charcoal or graphite, but then apply a white conté or a white pastel pencil and immediately get those highlights, kind of like you can see in the drawing on the front. They have this in brown, they have this in gray. I really love working on this material. Again, it's available in many different sizes right from your local arts and crafts store. It also has a lot of life to it. It's a very hard paper, so you can easily erase. It's a great one to sort of practice on before you go and start spending a significant amount of money per sheet on maybe more expensive paper like we're going to talk about next, to sort of get comfortable, to work out some of the kinks, and it'll be very, very forgiving for you. Then you have this idea of Bristol papers. There's Bristol vellum and Bristol smooth. These come in all sorts of different brands. I have a Canson variety. There's an ever so slight difference to the vellum and the smooth. This is the smooth. It's very, very thick, almost like a watercolor paper. Let's check out the difference between the vellum. Oh, and we've got a picture of our dog. See, the vellum is just ever so slightly different. You can experiment and feel them in the store to see which one you prefer, but these are going to be very, very soft. Bristol, by and large, whether it's vellum or smooth, is going to be very, very, very soft. And what do I mean by soft? It's not going to have any tooth to it. So you know when you're like, for example, this paper right here, I'll show you. If I come over the top of this, you can see how, let me do it with a darker so maybe you can see it a little bit easier. Okay, right here. See how there's all this texture in that paper? When I'm just bringing this conté crayon down the side, I'm applying even pressure all the way. Do you see how it's picking up? There's a lot of texture happening on this paper. This is a twin rocker paper, handmade. I got a big batch of this from a friend. And it's beautiful, but it's a little bit better for maybe some watercolors. It's very thick. It's not great for drawings that you want to find a high level of finish, because what you're going to have to do is come in with your maybe freshly sharpened pencil and spend a lot of time just filling in the gaps. It's going to accept the charcoal unevenly. The ridges are going to take more, and then the gaps are going to take less, and it's just going to be something that you might fight with more than you need to. If you're looking for a very fine level of finish, I would go with more of a Bristol. All right, let's get into the a little bit more expensive papers and a different way you could think about paper. There are so many varieties out there. I know a few that I really, really like, and you could experiment with them as well. You could create a toned paper for yourself by watercoloring over any type of paper. You can experiment and see what takes the watercolor very well. This was just a softer charcoal paper that I took a watercolor wash over and then did some figure sketches on. Really loved that effect that it created, the ability to put white on top, and especially in fast drawing situations, having that toned paper that you can create highlights on top of with a white charcoal pencil is a really helpful way to abbreviate the process. So that's something fun to experiment, because you can experiment with all kinds of colors, all kinds of applications. Now if we're getting into the other types of papers, I love Stonehenge, Mi-Teintes, and Arches paper, okay? So Mi-Teintes is spelled a little bit confusing. It looks like Mi-Teintes, but it's pronounced Mi-Teintes. Ask me how I know that, because I was saying Mi-Teintes in a workshop, and then someone came around and said, "Oh, are you using Mi-Teintes paper?" And I said, "Oh yes, of course I am." It is a really helpful, wonderful, and the most affordable that I have used of the nicer papers. Comes in many colors, is available from a lot of the online stores and maybe some in person if you have a big box art store. Lots of colors, it's very forgiving. The Arches papers can be a little bit less forgiving. This is a little bit more of a fabric-like paper. Even if you just feel it, which I realize you can't, it's got almost a fuzziness to it, which is a really nice application for certain drawings, but I wouldn't be using this paper for quick sketches. It's just not as forgiving. This is for a more carefully planned out drawing, and a very soft touch at the beginning. You know, I just wouldn't practice on this necessarily, but it's got that beautiful raw edge. You can buy it in these big sheets and then cut them to the size that you need. You do need to be careful if this piece of paper was on the top of the pile and it's got some dents and dings in it, which would really be unfortunate if I were to make a finished drawing on this. So once you have it, you do need a way to store the paper. My favorite of all of the papers, of the nicer, thicker papers, would be Stonehenge. This is just a small piece of Stonehenge that I cut to make 2 square drawings. It comes in many, many colors. It is extremely thick, almost like a cardboard, where you can fold it back and forth and then rip it, or you would definitely need an X-Acto knife. This is the craft brown color, and I just absolutely love this color to work on. It's very, very thick, and it's also very forgiving. It doesn't have that fabric-like feel that the Arches paper does, so you can erase. It's a little bit more forgiving, but it's just an elevated experience above the craft brown. It's thicker. It has a little bit more cushion to it, so when your pencil or even your eraser touches it, it just has a little bit more spring to it. If you're looking for more spring with a less expensive paper or a harder paper, what I highly suggest is taking your drawing board, which is another tool in addition to pencils, erasers, and papers. Get a really nice drawing board for yourself so you can draw upright at a 90-degree angle. Make sure it's a 90-degree angle so you're not working at an angle that then is making your proportions even harder to capture. What you can do is, instead of just working on one singular piece of paper like I did here with this drawing for Drawing Conclusions episode 4, is stack many, many papers. Even put a larger drawing pad behind, maybe some newsprint, which is a really wonderful and effective paper for doing quick studies. Very, very inexpensive, but not archival. It will yellow with time, which could look cool, and I think eventually it will disintegrate because I think there's some acid in the making of it. But if you're looking for just the cheapest of the cheap to do quick sketches, newsprint is it. Or put that pad of newsprint behind and then attach the paper you're working on to, because you'll get this springiness to the paper that isn't inherent to itself potentially on its own. See, this right here was just a really hard surface to be working on. I would have much preferred to have multiple sheets of paper behind it. You'll have to keep in mind that hard applications of the brush with a sharp pencil will scribe that paper potentially through to the next layer. So if it's really nice paper, you're going to want to preserve that paper, maybe have a buffer with a less nice paper, or again, just use a newsprint or a large pad of some other paper behind to create that cushion. All right. Drawing Materials 101 Parts 1 and Part 2 are now complete. We have covered all of the different graphites, charcoals, contés, and pastels that I love to use, and the erasers, why I use them, how I use them, their pros and their cons, some paper brands. There are so many more papers out there and so many more ways of applying dry media and wet media to them to create beautiful dry or mixed media drawings that almost would even become paintings. A drawing board is a very, very helpful tool to have. I highly suggest getting one. If you have any materials that I haven't mentioned here that are staples in your studio practice, please do drop them below. I am getting so reinvigorated to spend some more time after months and months and months of painting without let, back with my drawing materials, spending just diving into drawing as a pursuit more than just a useful thing to do studies with. So please drop them below for my benefit and for others. Thanks for joining me for Drawing Materials 101. I'll see you soon.